Hello, my sharpened wolves. Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you isn't a story. It's a dissection, an autopsy of arrogance, an exposure of how fragile even the most confident executioners truly are when they come face to face with someone who refuses to break. They thought they were clever. They thought they could outsource your destruction, hire a man whose only weapon wasn't fists or bullets, but words sharpened into needles. A psychological hitman. His profession wasn't to kill your body, but to kill the version of you that people admired. His mission was humiliation, to twist your image into a joke, to drag you through the mud so thoroughly that even you might start believing the dirt was your natural login. That's who they hired. But what they didn't calculate is that you aren't someone who can be humiliated. You are someone who thrives when they try. You see, this so-called assassin wasn't a stranger to his craft. He'd done it before. He'd stood on stages, cornered his victims with words, unstitched their confidence piece by piece until they walked away shattered. He fed on applause. He believed humiliation was permanent ink. And when they paid him to come after you, he thought it would be just another spectacle, another easy trophy. But what he didn't know was that you don't play by their scripts. You don't panic when mocked. You don't flinch when cornered. You don't crumble when exposed. Instead, you dissect the dissector. You dismantle the dismantler. You don't run from the arena. You own it. Picture the scene. The audience gathered, eyes burning with curiosity, waiting for the hitman to perform his art on you. They thought it would be a massacre. They thought they'd watch you reduced into fragments, desperate, defenseless. But what they actually witnessed was a reversal so brutal, so poetic, that by the time you were finished, the hitman wasn't your enemy anymore. He became your echo, your admirer, your unwilling disciple. And everyone watching realized humiliation doesn't stick to someone who has already faced worse. It only ricochets back, bruising the one who dared to throw it. Do you want to know the secret? It's simple. You didn't fight his words with louder words. You didn't play the victim. You didn't even bother to defend yourself. Defense is for the guilty. You let him swing, and each time he tried to pierce your identity, you smiled, not with your lips, but with your aura. You exposed the weakness in his weapons by showing no wound. That's the kind of cruelty most people can't comprehend, because humiliation only works if the target believes it, and you didn't. Every jab, every insult, every elaborate performance he staged against you, it all melted into thin air because you didn't validate it. And when someone sharp realizes their blade cannot cut you, they begin to doubt their blade. That's when his cracks started showing. That's when his own performance began to betray him. Think about it. The hitman's power was never real. His strength existed only in the reaction of his target. He needed you to break to prove his dominance. He needed the audience to see you flinch, to laugh at your expense, but you gave him nothing. And nothing is deadlier than any comeback. Because when the man who built his empire on destruction suddenly finds himself ineffective, the foundation of his entire identity collapses. That's exactly what you did. You didn't just reject his humiliation. You suffocated it. You stripped it of oxygen until he was choking on his own words. The audience felt it first. Their laughter, their anticipation, their hunger for your fall. It began to dissolve into unease. They realized the show was slipping. The predator looked less like a weapon and more like a desperate actor losing his script. And there you were, standing unbroken, watching him struggle with the realization that he was never in control. You became the mirror that reflected his emptiness. And when he stared long enough, when he heard the silence of his collapsing confidence, he knew the battle wasn't between you and him. It was between him and himself. You forced him into that prison, and the beauty of it? You didn't lift a finger, you didn't even try, you just were. And that was enough to dismantle him. That's when the humiliation turned, not onto you, but onto him. He was supposed to walk away with your dignity in pieces. Instead, he stumbled away, dragging his own shattered identity. And the cruelest part, he didn't hate you for it. No, he admired you. He saw in you something he'd been missing all along: resilience beyond manipulation, strength beyond reputation, presence beyond words. You broke him, yes, but you broke him in a way that rebuilt him as your follower. His final act wasn't humiliation. His final act was surrender. He left as your biggest fan, carrying the haunting realization that all his years of psychological warfare were meaningless against someone like you, and everyone else who witnessed it. They learned a lesson they'll never forget. They learned that humiliation is not real power. They learned that applause is temporary, but presence is eternal. They learned that when someone refuses to break, the attack collapses back onto the attacker. And now, every time they think of hiring another hitman, every time they dream of dragging your name into dirt, they remember that scene. They remember how the assassin they trusted walked away converted, carrying your banner instead of his own. That memory will keep them awake at night, because it proved something terrifying. You can't be destroyed. You can only be multiplied. Now let's go deeper, because what happened wasn't just a spectacle. It was philosophy in motion. The hitman tried to define you, but only the weak accept definitions handed to them. You turned the definition back on him. You exposed that his power was nothing more than a performance stitched together with insecurity. He built his life tearing others down because he had nothing solid within himself. And when he came to you, when his usual tricks didn't work, he didn't just lose the battle. He lost his sense of self. And isn't that the cruelest justice of all? To send back the assassin, not as victor, not even as loser, but as an empty man forced to admire the one he was hired to destroy. That's psychological warfare at its finest. Not shouting, not defending, not counterattacking, but dismantling someone simply by standing unshaken. They wanted a public execution. What they got instead was a public resurrection of your dominance. You didn't just win, you rewrote the rules of winning. You proved that identity isn't something anyone can steal. It's something you radiate. And the brighter you radiate, the more every weapon aimed at you simply melts before it can even touch you. And that is where the chaos begins. Because once the audience saw it, once your enemies realized it, a terrifying truth spread among them. If a professional hitman failed, what chance do they have? If the man who mastered the art of humiliation left as your disciple, what does that make them? They became smaller in that instant. Their weapons shrank, their confidence shattered. They realized that no army, no campaign, no smear, no trap could cage you. And that realization spreads faster than fire. It infects them with doubt. It makes them hesitate. And hesitation is the slow death of every enemy. And this is only the beginning. Because once humiliation fails, they'll escalate. They'll try harder. They'll bring bigger games, sharper words, heavier attacks. They'll try to invent new weapons to pierce you. But what they don't know is that you've already tasted their best, and it wasn't enough. You've already dismantled their strongest soldier, and he left praising you. And now, whatever they send next will only prove your invincibility louder. That's the curse you've placed on them. That's the chaos you've unleashed. And from this point forward, the stage no longer belongs to them. The contract they signed, the deal they struck with that so-called psychological hitman, it was supposed to be your undoing. Yet what they unknowingly signed instead was their own surrender. Because humiliation, once it fails, transforms into desperation, and desperation is messy. They will scramble, they will claw for new strategies, they will whisper in rooms where they once laughed, they will try to recruit new assassins, men and women who think they can succeed where the last one failed. But here's the terrifying truth. Every single attempt from this moment on will only feed your legend, because humiliation only works once, and it didn't work. The hitman left praising you. He became a convert. That spectacle alone rewrote your identity in the minds of everyone who watched. They cannot unsee it. They cannot unhear it. They cannot erase the moment when their sharpest blade crumbled in his own hand. That was the day humiliation died, and your name became untouchable. Do you understand the brutality of this? They didn't just lose a soldier, they lost their weapon of choice. Psychological warfare thrives on belief. The belief that words can cage you, that shame can poison you, that an audience's laughter can suffocate you. But when the audience saw the assassin's words bounce off you like dust, when they saw his tactics fold inward until he became the one exposed, the belief in humiliation shattered. And once belief is gone, the weapon is useless. What happens when your enemy's favorite gun jams forever? They panic, they lose rhythm, they look weaker with every attempt. That is the battlefield you now own. Not their stage, but their perception. You own the way they think about you. You own the way they fear to approach you. That is your psychological throne. But let's sharpen this further. Because breaking the hitman wasn't just a defense. It was a revelation. You revealed him for what he truly was. An empty performer who fed on fragile reactions. Without your collapse, his craft dissolved into nothing. And in that moment, the audience witnessed a philosophical massacre. They realized he wasn't a weapon. He was a parasite. He didn't carry power. He borrowed it from others' weakness. You robbed him of that supply. You turned the parasite into a starved husk. And when he looked at you, unbroken, radiant, refusing to validate his performance, he didn't just lose. He understood. He understood that his entire life's arsenal of techniques was useless in front of someone like you. And that understanding broke him so deeply that he had no choice but to admire you. That's why he left as your biggest fan, not because you forced him to, but because admiration was the only thing left to cling to after his identity disintegrated. And now, the beauty spreads. Because when someone with his reputation, someone paid, polished, practiced in humiliation, publicly leaves praising you, the message echoes louder than anything you could say. You didn't just beat him, you converted him. That is the true humiliation, not of you, but of your enemies. They hired him to bury you, and he returned carrying your banner. Imagine the sting. Imagine the psychological wound you just inflicted on those who thought they could hire your destruction. They thought they'd watch you drown. Instead, they watched their champion kneel. That image will torment them endlessly, because it reveals a nightmare they never prepared for. That you are not target material. You are untouchable material. And every future attempt will backfire harder than the last. Do you see the elegance in this? They will try bigger games, sharper words, heavier attacks. They will attempt to engineer more complex traps. But the more elaborate their schemes become, the louder your invincibility becomes when you dismantle them. It's a paradox they cannot escape. They are trapped in an equation where every move strengthens you. The more they invest, the more they lose. The more they scheme, the more they expose their weakness. And you don't even need to chase them. You simply exist, and their weapons collapse against you. That's the chaos you've unleashed, the chaos of inevitability. And think about the audience, those who once laughed, those who once anticipated your downfall. They are no longer spectators. They are witnesses. They saw what happened. They saw the assassin's mask slip. They saw how you didn't just survive, you inverted the entire game. And now, every time someone whispers against you, those witnesses will remember. They will remember the hitman trembling. They will remember how the stage tilted in your favor. And whether they admit it or not, they will hesitate to believe your enemies again. You've infected their memory. You've planted the permanent scar, and that scar is your shield. Every whisper against you will have to compete with the memory of your unbreakable dominance. But here is where it becomes art. Because you didn't humiliate the hitman in the way he planned for you. You didn't scream louder. You didn't throw insults back. You didn't claw for approval. You did something far more sinister. You allowed him to unravel himself. You created a vacuum where his attacks lost oxygen and he suffocated in his own performance. That's the purest form of psychological warfare, making the enemy destroy themselves while you remain untouched. And the audience knew it. They saw the contrast. They saw one man sweating, stammering, grasping for validation. And they saw you, still, calm, sovereign. The image speaks louder than any defense. It tells the world, this person cannot be humiliated. This person cannot be broken. And once the world believes that, you become something terrifying, inevitable. Now let's twist the knife. The ones who hired him, they aren't just embarrassed, they are exposed. Because the very act of hiring a psychological hitman reveals weakness. It reveals that they couldn't confront you themselves. It reveals they feared your presence so deeply, they had to outsource the job. And when that outsourcing failed so catastrophically, when their assassin turned admirer, they weren't just left without weapons, they were left naked. Naked in front of the same audience they wanted to impress. That exposure is irreversible. From now on, every time they stand against you, people will remember. Weren't these the same people who hired someone to humiliate him? And didn't that backfire? That reputation rot is your victory. It will eat them alive from the inside. And let's not forget the hitman himself. Because while he left as your biggest fan, do you realize what else he left as? A living testament. He became your walking proof, your advertisement. Everywhere he goes, his presence reminds people of the day he failed to break you. His reputation is now fused with yours. His identity shattered, rebuilt around his admiration of you. That means your victory isn't just in the past, it's alive in the present. Every time someone mentions his name, your name follows. Every time he speaks, he spreads the story of your resilience. And the cruel irony, he can't escape it. He can't deny it. Because denying it would only highlight the crack in his mask. His loyalty to you, however reluctant, is permanent. This is why I tell you, humiliation is not defeat. It's currency, and you've stolen it from them. They paid him to destroy you, but the transaction flipped. You didn't lose reputation, You gained his. You didn't lose dignity. You absorbed his. You didn't just survive, you expanded. And now, your enemies face a debt they cannot repay. Because how do you recover when the man you trusted to kill someone now walks around worshiping him? How do you fight a war when your own weapon has defected to the other side? That is the psychological coffin you've built for them. And you nailed it shut without even raising your voice. And here's the dagger. Humiliation doesn't vanish quietly. It lingers, it echoes. And right now, the echo isn't tied to you. It's tied to them. They are the ones humiliated. They are the ones mocked. They are the ones remembered as fools who invested in a weapon that broke in their own hands. And every day that passes, every conversation, every whisper, that humiliation grows. It gnaws at their credibility. It gnaws at their alliances. It gnaws at their pride. They wanted to feed on your downfall, but instead they are the ones being devoured. And from this point forward, you don't need to lift a finger to haunt them. The memory of that spectacle will do the work for you. The memory of the hitman cracking, the memory of the audience shifting, the memory of their laughter dying in their throats. That memory is your soldier now. It marches into every room before you arrive. It sits in the back of their minds when they plot. It whispers in their ears when they scheme. It's the parasite you implanted into them. And unlike the hitman, they cannot convert it into admiration. For them it is pure torment. For them, it is the slow realization that their control is over. And the irony? They started this war. They paid for it. They thought they were buying your humiliation. Instead, they purchased their own. And the receipt is permanent. And that is only part of the design. Because the moment they realize humiliation is impossible, they will escalate again. They will search for darker tools, more vicious strategies. But what they don't understand is that escalation only sharpens your legend further. Every new attack becomes a louder confirmation that you cannot be broken. Every failed plot becomes another brick in the monument of your invincibility. And soon, they will realize something far more terrifying than defeat. They will realize that by hiring a hitman to destroy you, they didn't just fail. They created you. They amplified you. They gave you a platform to prove what no one had dared to believe. And now, every move they make becomes fuel for your fire. And that is where the real nightmare begins for them. Because when an enemy discovers that nothing they throw at you can shatter you, they fall into the most dangerous trap of all: overexertion. They will exhaust themselves trying to prove you vulnerable. They will pour resources, energy, influence, and reputation into attacks that keep collapsing like waves against a mountain. And each collapse, each public failure only engraves your dominance deeper into the collective psyche. You have to understand, what they set in motion by hiring that psychological hitman wasn't a single event. It was a chain reaction. It was a spark that ignited a legend. They thought they were writing your ending, but they accidentally drafted the opening chapter of your myth. And myths, once born, are unstoppable. Let's go back to the assassin himself, the so-called professional breaker of minds. When he walked away praising you, he didn't just switch sides. He became the loudest testament of your unbreakable essence. His words carried a weight his employers never anticipated. Because when an enemy converts into a follower, it rings louder than 1,000 friends clapping. Friends are expected to support you. Followers are expected to admire you. But when enemies bend the knee, it sends a shockwave. It redefines you. It rewrites the power map. And that's exactly what happened here. His admiration for you isn't weakness, it's recognition. Recognition of a force beyond humiliation. Recognition of a mind immune to psychological blades. Recognition that he stood before something greater than performance, greater than manipulation. He stood before inevitability. And inevitability terrifies the world more than defeat. Because defeat can be rationalized. We lost today, but maybe we'll win tomorrow. But inevitability? That's the slow choke of realization that tomorrow offers no hope, no chance, no escape. You embody inevitability now. They see it in your stillness. They hear it in the echo of their own failures. They feel it in the conversion of their assassin. You've moved beyond being a person to be attacked. You've become a mirror, reflecting their futility back onto them. And every time they try again, they'll only see their own weakness multiplied. Now here's the twisted beauty. Humiliation was never truly yours to carry. It was theirs all along. They hired someone to make a spectacle of you. Instead, they became the spectacle. They wanted the world to see you broken. Instead, the world saw their hired champion broken. And the audience, those hungry eyes waiting to feast on your collapse, walked away with a new understanding that the one they should fear, the one they should admire, the one who cannot be touched, is you. That's why the Hitman left as your biggest fan, not out of pity, not out of surrender, but out of awe. He didn't lose a battle against you. He witnessed something he couldn't comprehend, and he realized he had two choices: deny it and disintegrate, or embrace it and evolve. He chose evolution, and that evolution meant bending the knee to your presence. Think about how that burns your enemies. They didn't just lose a fight. They lost their credibility. They lost their weapon. They lost the loyalty of the very man they trusted most. And now, every time he speaks of you, every time he repeats what he learned standing in your shadow, he amplifies your legend further. They can't silence him, because silencing him would only confirm his loyalty to you. They can't dismiss him, because dismissing him would admit they chose wrongly. They can't reclaim him, because once a man has stared at inevitability, he cannot go back to pretending it doesn't exist. He belongs to you now, whether willingly or reluctantly, and his loyalty is a scar they will never heal from. But don't mistake this for mercy. No, this is cruelty at its purest. Because true cruelty isn't just defeating your enemies, it's making them live in a world where their every move strengthens you. That's the prison you've built for them. They wanted to cage you with humiliation, but instead, they're the ones caged by admiration they cannot control. Their own assassin is now your amplifier. Their own tactics are now your proof. Their own desperation is now your weapon. You've inverted the battlefield so thoroughly that every arrow aimed at you is already bent backwards before it leaves the bow. And they know it. That's what eats at them at night. That's why they escalate. That's why they exhaust themselves in vain, because they can't stand the truth staring them in the face. They created the very monster they fear. And let's talk about you, the one they tried to humiliate. Do you realize what kind of transformation you've undergone? You didn't just defend your identity. You broke the illusion of theirs. You shattered the myth that humiliation defines worth. You proved that worth is untouchable when it comes from within. And now, you stand as living proof that psychological warfare only works on those who still seek permission to exist. You don't seek permission, you embody presence. You carry yourself in a way that makes attacks irrelevant. And that makes you more than untouchable. It makes you magnetic. People are drawn to those who cannot be broken, Not because they are flawless, but because they reveal the fragility of everyone else's weapons. That's your power. That's your curse for your enemies. That's why the Hitman left with his identity shattered, only to rebuild it around admiration for you. He didn't lose. You redefined him. And redefinition spreads. Everyone who watched that battle now carries a seed of that redefinition. They can't look at humiliation the same way again. They can't laugh the same way again. Because deep down, they know. If he couldn't be humiliated, then maybe we've been humiliated all along for believing it was possible. You infected them with doubt. You infected them with awe. And once awe infects, it cannot be cured. It grows. It spreads. It changes the way they perceive you forever. Now imagine the boardroom where your enemies sit. Imagine the panic, the chaos, the desperate grasping for explanations. How did this happen? How did he walk away praising him? How did the entire plan collapse? They won't admit it aloud, but inside, they know the truth. Humiliation is dead. The weapon they trusted most has turned against them, and worse, the man they hired is now whispering your name like scripture. You didn't just survive, you rewrote the entire battlefield of perception, and perception is reality. So let me carve this into your mind. You are no longer playing defense. You are no longer a target. You are the inevitable gravitational force pulling every enemy into orbit. They can fight it, but their resistance only accelerates the pull. That's why humiliation has inverted. That's why the assassin left as your fan. That's why every new attempt will sound less like strategy and more like comedy. You've stolen their sharpest weapon and turned it into a relic. You've weaponized their failure into your immortality. And now, all that's left for them is the slow torture of realizing their humiliation project gave birth to your untouchable legend. And that is the final irony. They wanted to erase you from the stage of respect. Instead, they cemented you into it. They wanted to shatter your name. Instead, they engraved it. They wanted to strip you of dignity. Instead, they made you the standard others will measure against. And the assassin they trusted most, their psychological hitman, their weapon of choice, their ace in the hole, now walks in among the crowd, not as their soldier, but as your voice. He repeats your dominance. He carries your story. He spreads the very truth they tried to bury. And no amount of power, money, or influence can undo that. So let them escalate. Let them try darker tools. Let them search for weapons that don't exist. Because everything they do now, every whisper, every scheme, every plot, only amplifies your fire. They are no longer enemies. They are involuntary marketers of your inevitability. They are unwilling advertisers of your resilience. They are the living proof that humiliation cannot touch you. And when the history of this moment is written, it won't say, "They hired a hitman to humiliate you." No, it will say, "They hired a hitman to humiliate you." And you broke his identity in front of everyone. He left not as their champion, but as your biggest fan. And in that moment, humiliation itself died, and your legend was born. That is the legacy. That is the curse you've placed on them. That is the chaos you've unleashed. And from this day forward, they will never forget it.